Today we celebrate Good Friday. Some may ask, why do you call it good when it's about a man on a cross? Well, he's not just a man, he is God, and it's about what he did on the cross. And why the cross? Why did it need to be done that way? The most horrible of deaths? Well, he was covering the most horrible of sins, and all of them. Back in Genesis, we see into the story of Adam and Eve, into the creation of humanity, into that relationship that we had with God unbroken in the beginning. But we also see to the fall. What is the fall? That brokenness of relationship with God. That humanity believed the lie from the enemy that God was holding out on them. They willfully gave themselves over to this lie, and in doing so created a great divide between the one who loved them and themselves and the world around them. You see, God knew at that time when that happened that he was the one who was going to come to redeem. That his will for us was good, that his will for us was out of love, even in our brokenness and even in us becoming enemies of God. He still loved us. This is what we celebrate on Good Friday, that God came in the flesh to break that contract that we made with sin in the very beginning, a contract that we had no power to break on our own. And Jesus, for the joy set before him, meaning us, endured the cross, that pain and that suffering on our behalf. He is the King of glory. Though when he was on that cross, he was mocked. Mark chapter 15, verse 25. And it was the third hour, which is sometime in the morning, when they crucified him. And the inscription on the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." And with him they crucified two robbers, one on his right and one on his left. And those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, "Ah, you who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross." So also the chief priests with the scribes mocked him to one another, saying, "He saves others, he cannot save himself. Let the Christ, the King of Israel, come down from the cross, that we may see him and believe." They're mocking him because they're saying, if you're really God, take your will and bring yourself off of that cross. Bring yourself down and prove to us, then we will believe. Trying to bait him in their own minds of, hey, you want us to believe in you? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, bring yourself down, take yourself up. You know, he raised Lazarus from the dead. Who is this guy that can't even take himself off the cross? What a mock, right? But Jesus stayed on that cross. He willfully chose to sacrifice, to stay on that cross for us. Whenever we come to the cross, I have to ask myself, I'm a follower of Christ, that I know that I have my own cross to bear, that he says in Matthew 16:24, he says, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it." And I ask, what does that mean to take up my own cross? And I realize every single day I choose whether or not I am going to sacrifice for the sake of God's love, for love, or am I going to not sacrifice, take myself off of that cross in a sense of suffering, and I'm going to choose my own way, which is then even believing the lies that the enemy has that God is holding out on me. So I have a choice every single day. Am I going to trust God and carry my own cross, knowing that it's going to be hard and I'm going to go through suffering, that it's going to be a sacrifice? In order for me to have life, the trueness of life that comes after the cross from the resurrection power of Christ in my life? Or am I going to choose my own will and my own way in order to have in the moment what I think is good? This will that God gave to us, this free will, is a gift from him. You cannot have true love without free will. People ask, why did God give humanity free will in the first place if he knew it was only going to lead to their destruction and separation? Well, first, it does not lead to our destruction in Christ. And in Christ, we are no longer separated. So he knew the plan, but why in the world would he do that with our free will and give it to us? God has free will. We are made in God's image, and love cannot exist without free will. What is it to say that someone comes to you and says, I love you, but they are forced to say it? That's not love. Love, pure, true love, is when it is a free gift given from another onto you. This is what God did for us, and he designed and made us to be able to do the same. You see, our hope in God does not disappoint, because his love for us, our hope in him, is based in his love for us. So we can hope in God when we face the cross of our own lives every single day. We can hope in God that he will get us through, that we can be tempted by the crowd around us or by our own self, the enemy himself, to come down from our own cross to take the easy route, the easy way. But we know by looking at the cross, we can focus on the Lord. He will get us through and give us the power to overcome that. And also then we will have a life that comes afterwards. Verse 33. And when the 6th hour had come, there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. And at the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani, which means, sorry for the terrible reading right there, my God, why have you forsaken me? And some of the bystanders hearing it said, behold, he is calling Elijah. That's referencing Psalm 22. Read it, because him saying that right there has great significance. Read Psalm 22. And someone ran and filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink, saying, wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to take him down. And Jesus uttered a loud cry and breathed his last. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion, who stood facing him, saw that this was he, the way he breathed his last, he said, truly, this man was the Son of God. The curtain in the temple that was torn in two, behind that curtain, that is where the mercy seat of God was. In the tabernacle and the wilderness and the temple, the Old Testament, you hear about the Ark of the Covenant, and on top of it there is 2 cherubim that are facing, and in between the cherubim there's the mercy seat of God, and that was the presence of God where the high priest would go in once a year and sprinkle the blood of the sacrifice onto that area as a forgiveness of sins. But the forgiveness of sins was not a complete wash away forever. It was more like a pushback of payment for the debts of the sins of the people that had built up since the beginning of humanity and the fall in the garden, that those sins were being pushed back. So payment was not yet required. Pushed back year after year by the high priest and the blood that was brought in from the high priest. That mercy seat of God was only seen by that high priest once a year at that time of sacrifice. And it was for mercy then coming out onto the people from God, because God's heart is love. So he knew in our separation, our sin, and the stuff that we went through, that he wanted his mercies to access us. And this was the way through the law that it was to be done. Now, Jesus fulfilled the law. He fulfilled the payment required of all sin, which was the highest payment, which was a perfect sacrifice, and in exchange for that freedom. And he, God himself, is the only sacrifice that was worthy, that could fulfill that perfect payment. He gave himself, shed his own blood, and brought it to the mercy seat of God. And when that veil was torn, a thick veil was torn in two, the mercy seat of God was made accessible for all. We now get to look in and approach the mercy seat of God, because our high priest, Jesus Christ, the Messiah, made the way for us. That is why Good Friday is good, because we now have access to the mercy seat of God through the blood of Christ. And if we want to contest that, how we don't have a problem with this bondage or any of this stuff, tell me, do you suffer from fear? Do you suffer from hardship and anxiety? Hardship to a place that just feels like it's gonna take you? Do you find yourself lying to try to get your way? Do you know that you fall back into your own ways again and again, even when you know they're not good for you? Do you find yourself getting angry, overly angry at times, and hurting the people around you? So all of us deal with these things. Why do we seek out so much help in this world? And not that once you come to that mercy seat and you receive God's grace, does life all of a sudden become perfect. It will not, until we're on the other side in heaven. But in this world, we do have access to God's presence, His grace, His forgiveness, which frees us to really live our life and to be strengthened when we face these things, the temptations and the things that we know are not good, and even the stuff that we don't know about. God is the one who comes and helps us in those times. So may this also be your Good Friday, to worship the King of Kings who died for you to set you free. And may that cross become a place of joy for you because of what it means in Him. God bless you.